Well, I happen to enjoy good, clean jokes. I think that they can be a great deal of fun. I think they can be something worth sharing with other people. And one of the books I have is titled The Last of the Good, Clean Joke Books. How about that? Now, I don't know if this is the last one. It was published in 1974, so maybe there haven't been any good, clean joke books since. I'm not sure if there have been any good, clean jokes since, but I'd just like to suggest to you that there are a couple of things that we could consider here as, shall we say, good and clean. I don't know. Are they funny? Here are a couple that have reference to the college. Let's just say the classroom. For example, the teacher who says to the student, "What do you call a person who keeps on talking when people are no longer interested?" The student said, "A teacher." Boo. Yes. Well, anyway, a little learning, of course, is a dangerous thing. Yeah, it is dangerous. If you don't believe it, ask any kid who just brought home a bad report card. That'll take care of it, too. Then, Steve, talking about good, clean jokes, there's the one about the banana here, which is, it's an old timer. You probably have heard these things, but still, well, from the good, clean joke book, where the teacher asked a student how to spell banana, and the student said, "Well, I know how to spell it, but I just don't know when to stop." Banana. And so it goes, banana, huh? It's pretty good. Then we have, is this a funny one? Be interested in your reaction to this. The question is, how do you milk an ant? And the answer is, well, first you get a very low stool. That's not too bad. And you've probably heard this one, little wordplay here, and I enjoy it. If a dog lost his tail, where would he get another one? Well, he'd get it at a retail store, naturally. Ho, ho, ho. And maybe you've heard the little inquiry, what has four legs and flies? What has four legs and flies? The answer, of course, a picnic table. That's from the last of the good, clean joke books. I don't know whether they're jokes in the mind of all of you that might be listening this morning. How do you get rid of company that stays too long? How do you get rid of company that stays too long? Treat them just like the rest of the family. That's pretty good. And I kind of like this one, even though this goes over the years. You know, this little book was published over 20 years ago. And I'm showing a little bit of my own nastiness, I guess. I don't quite understand a lot of the wah, wah, wah music that goes on these days. But here's this little one. What is the best thing about popular songs? And the answer, they're not popular very long. That's supposed to be the best thing about it. Well, so be it. The book runs, this last book runs 126 pages, has a number of very, very good things. You've heard about the new drive-in confessional, for example. It's called Toot and Tell. That's one of the clean ones, see? And I suppose that we all can make our judgments as to whether it was, as to whether they're really funny. I'm going to close this brief program this morning. I know you're happy that it's brief. With another teacher-student encounter, and it a little wordplay in it too. And the teacher says, "What is the formula for water?" And the student says, HIJKLMNO. That's the formula for water? Yeah. The teacher says, "Well, that's not the formula I gave you." The student says, "Yes, it is. You said it was H2O. HIJKLM. And yeah, well, best thing for you folks is for me to say, that's all for now. And the worst thing, I'll be back next week at the same time. Hello, there's a bestseller book that came out not too long ago that I'd just like to comment on a little bit this morning. It was published in 1993. The authors are Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. Actually, they're not the author of all that's in the book. They have simply gathered together a series of encounters, all meaningful and true, people with little stories to tell, adventures, encounters, to open the heart and rekindle the spirit, as they say. The title of the book is Chicken Soup for the Soul. Perhaps many of you have already encountered it. I certainly commend it to you. It's published by Health Communications out of Florida. The authors, again, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. Well, they're the compilers. But people submit encounters and reflections, experiences, and little stories that they'd heard. And it's chicken soup for the soul. It kind of gives a little bit of upbeat for all of us. As they quote someone, money and fame don't automatically make people happy. It has to come from within. Just like to share with you a little kind of metaphorical account here submitted by Patty Henson, and that was published in Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's titled Risking. Just runs a little over a page here. Little account, little story of two seeds. They lay side by side in the fertile spring soil. And the first seed said, I want to grow. I want to send my roots deep into the soil beneath me and thrust my sprouts through the earth's crust above me. I want to unfurl my tender buds like banners to announce the arrival of spring. I want to feel the warmth of the sun on my face and the blessing of the morning dew on my petals. And so she grew. And the second seed said, I'm afraid. If I send my roots into the ground below, I don't know what I'll encounter in the dark. If I push my way through the hard soil above me, I might damage my delicate sprouts. And what if I let my buds open and a snail tries to eat them? And if I were to open my blossoms, a small child might pull me from the ground. Oh, no, it's much better for me to wait until it's safe. And so she waited. And a yard hen, scratching around in the early spring, in the early spring ground, for food, the yard hen found the waiting seed and promptly ate it. Now the moral of the story. Those of us who refuse to risk and grow get swallowed up by life. How about that? That's something to think about for all of us. And I would suggest that maybe we can benefit from it in many different ways. Just one other short item from Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's a bestseller according to the New York Times, this little collection, and I think it's a grand one. A submission this time by John Holt titled We Learn by Doing. It's just a paragraph. And he writes this, not many years ago I began to play the cello. Most people would say that what I'm doing is learning to play the cello. But these words carry into our minds the strange idea that there exists two very different processes. One, learning to play the cello, and two, playing the cello. Now, they imply that I will do the first until I have completed it, at which point I will stop the first process and begin the second. In short, I will go on learning to play until I have learned to play, and then I will begin to play. Well, of course, this is nonsense. There are not two processes, but one. And he concludes, we learn to do something by doing it. There's no other way. Think of that. Well, these are just two brief items from Chicken Soup for the Soul. 101 stories to open the heart and rekindle the spirit. And I recommend it to you very much, written and compiled by Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. chicken soup for the soul. And I'll be back next week with, who knows, maybe we'll have something else to eat, at least to ponder on. Melvin Helitzer is a delightfully humorous individual, and one of his books is titled Comedy Writing Secrets. It was copyrighted in 1987, and I thinking of Melvin Helitzer very much because we have a little bit in common as a career professor at Mount Union College over the years. My paths crossed with Mel Helitzer. He's a professor also, and get this, he teaches humor. He teaches comedy and does humor workshops, and is an excellent person in discussing the way in which humor develops in our experience and the ways in which the writers of comedy scripts develop their material for the professional comedians and so on. One of the ways I'd just like to share with you this time is the simple truth. Yes, the simple truth. And the simple truth makes logic rather illogical. For example, it's the call me a taxi. Okay, you're a taxi. How's that? Now, tie in with that, and this is for all people from Rodney Dangerfield. He had this in one of his shows. He said, now this is the simple truth. See, if you really take what it said here. My wife went window shopping yesterday. She came home with 7 windows. Or, well, you can have it a variety of ways. How about the caveman to the child? The caveman says, when I was your age, my parents used to rock me to sleep. The rocks were as big as your head. But see, now this is done in a straightforward way. It's not done as though it is humor. It is done as, well, the straightforward words. Sure, it can happen. Let's take the case of Grandma Eldon. Grandma Eldon was babysitting. See, Grandma Eldon was babysitting, and every 5 minutes, little Adrian had another request to keep from going to sleep. Well, Grandma Eldon was exasperated, and she said to her little 4-year-old granddaughter, Adrian, if you call Grandma one more time, I'm going to get very angry. Got that? So 5 minutes later, Adrian came in and said, Mrs. Eldon, can I have a glass of water? She didn't call Grandma. She called Mrs. Eldon. I think that's wonderful. And there are all sorts of ways in which this can develop. There's a whole chapter on this in Melvin Helitzer's book, Comedy Writing Secrets. The simple truth, a whole variety of jokes. I'd call them formula jokes. But, for example, the teacher to the student who said, when's your birthday? October 17th. What year? Every year. Yes, see, now that's what was asked. That's true. How about the co-ed who says to the professor, what kind of husband should I get? And the professor says, get a single man. You leave the husbands alone. Well, there it is. I think, well, just 2 more, just to share out of this, but it has to do with the straight truth in it. I spilled spot remover on my dog, and now he's gone. Spot remover, so be it. Now, it is true that over the years teaching creative writing, and I've worked with student manuscripts and people sending me their manuscripts over the years, and appreciate it very much. But I always think of the time that one of my students sent a copy of a manuscript to an editor. And the editor responded, thank you for sending me a copy of your manuscript. I shall waste no time reading it. Well, I don't think it was read at all. This is humor in a very, very straightforward way. And Mel Helitzer calls it simply the simple truth. The simple truth. I'll close with this one, which illustrates it. I think it's the childish riddle But it uses this simple truth now as the touchstone. Here it is. I bet you I can say the capital of all 50 states in less than a minute. Oh, that's impossible. It's a bet. Ready, set, go. Okay, the capital of all 50 states in less than a minute. There, I said it. You lose. Boo. I bet I can say the capital of all 50 states in less than a minute. Well, I bet I can say I hope to be back with you next week and that you may tune in then. Bye.
You're underway. I'll clear out of here so there's no noise. And then I'll reset this. There.
This Monday is a day of remembrance, isn't it? We all join in what might be called the gift of remembrance, the special opportunity given to all of us to recall and to share in loving acknowledgement the awe of all the endeavors of those who have left a legacy of duty and purpose, a legacy of love and of sacrifice. I think this day of an American soldier who was taken prisoner of war. He survived more than a year of torture and pain. His name was Captain Gerald Coffey. And he later said, and this has been quoted, he said, faith was the key to my survival. Faith in myself to pursue my duty, faith in my fellow man, and faith in my comrades in those other cell blocks. Faith in my country and its national purpose, and faith in God, the foundation of it all. And then the captain added, our lives are a continuing journey, and we must learn and grow at every bend, and we make our way. Sometimes stumbling, but always moving towards the finest within us. Well, dear friends, on this very important day, surely for all of us, the continuing journey involves faith in times of peace as well as in times of war. This day is a day of remembrance, and let us all keep our faith, have remembrance of those who have sacrificed, and let us all seek to be a part of the legacy for others of loving acknowledgement of the endeavors of all who have sacrificed for the good of our nation, for the good of mankind. That's my message for this brief while with Lyle on this very special morning. Be back with you next week.
Test.
Well, good morning. There are those who have asked me since the While with Lyle began on WRMU some months, or was it years ago? I'm not sure. Anyway, they've asked me, well, now, how do you prepare these programs, and do you have a written script that you follow in doing this? I think if you've listened at any other time, you probably know, no, I don't have any script. Actually, I don't. All I do is bring a little book with me, maybe, or just something that, maybe a newspaper, whatever, and frankly, I just kind of make it up as I go along. That is, not make it up fictionally, but do the sharing. It's a little bit like conversation on the street, and that's all that I intend this to be with our little while together here. It can also be a little bit like that in a classroom, where one gets involved in the sense of questions and answers or discussions about whatever matters come up. And at this hour of the day, I always think that a few laughs, not too far out of question, and I wanted to share a couple of them with you this morning. I've got a book in front of me here by Bennett Cerf. Bennett Cerf was the co-founder of the Random House Publishing Company and was its president for many, 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 many years. He's deceased now, but he also was, do you remember, some of you, if anybody's around who remembers that TV show of many years ago, What's My Line? Well, he was featured as a panelist on that. In any event, here's a fellow who was philosophically very profound at times and certainly well educated and proved his worth at his leadership in publishing, and yet he loved to laugh. He loved silly little things. He enjoyed it. And he's got one of his number of books is called The Book of Laughs. Now it's for beginning readers. That's right. So I thought it'd be good for me to have it. I might be able to do that. It's just full of illustrations and little comments, such as the teacher in school said, "Marvin, if I lay one egg here and another egg there, how many eggs will there be?" And Marvin says, "There will not be any eggs." The teacher said, "No eggs at all? Why not?" And because, Marvin said, "You can't lay eggs." Or what about the one where on the way home, Marvin is walking with Jenny, and Jenny says, "Marvin, look at my grandmother. She went in to get her hair cut." And so there's Grandma in the beauty parlor there, and the two children looking in. "She went in to get her hair cut, so now she won't look like an old lady anymore." And you know what Marvin said? "Yeah, I can see that. Now she looks like an old man." Is that funny? Well, no comment, I guess. You'll just have to decide. Anyway, we have such as Marvin goes, when he's home, he runs up to his father and says, "Father, Andy just swallowed my 10 cents. So the father picks up little Andy, puts him upside down and shakes him, and he shook 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 him, and at last a dime came out of his mouth. And the father said, "Here it is. Here's your dime, Marvin." And Marvin says, "This isn't my dime. Andy swallowed 10 pennies. Now, is that funny? Well, that's the kind of thing that we get into, of course, with what is humor? What is laughter? And, of course, Bennett Cerf, who knows all the sophisticated ones, was just indicating some of the little, I kind of like reading this book. You know, I don't have to work too hard to appreciate it. At the farm, Marvin sees a little cow and says, "What are those two things on her head?" And the farmer says, "Those are horns." And just then the cow went, "Moo!" And you know what Marvin said? "Which one of those horns did she blow?" Well, so be it. And how about the time that Marvin went over to play with Sammy? And they're playing together, and Sammy says, "What time is it?" And Marvin says, "I don't know, but I know it's not 5 yet." And Sammy says, "How do you know it's not 5? Marvin says, "Because Mommy said I had to be home at 5, and I'm not at home, so it can't be 5 yet." Finally, see, these are profound. Oh, to show you how deep you can get. But of course, what Bennett Cerf is doing here is just this. There's a reality to this. There's an easy way in which youngsters can misinterpret words and can have some answers and some comments that, sure, if an adult did this, we'd be a little unhappy, but we can still appreciate and can still laugh at the humor that's involved. How about this one? Now, here's a phrase that we commonly utilize, and yet do we take it literally? Marvin, the little boy, gets a new watch, and he shows it to Jenny. And Jenny looks at it and says, "Does your watch tell the time?" Marvin says, "No, it never tells the time. I always have to look at it." Or how about one more here? Marvin says to his mother, Mommy, Andy and I want to play elephants, and we want you to play with us. And his mother says, how can I play elephants with you? Marvin says, oh, you can. It's easy. You can play the nice lady who gives us peanuts. Yes, see, that's how it goes. Now, if this comes from a person of, as I say, of the achievement, of the adult's achievement of a Bennett Cerf from his little book, then of course we have, I think, something that applies to all of us, whatever our particular background is. We can come up with some of these as well, it seems to me. So, remember now, you can't lay eggs. No. You can give us peanuts. No, my watch doesn't tell me time. I have to look at it. It isn't 5 o'clock because I have to be home by then. Well, but it is time for a while with Lyle to conclude. I think we've done enough of that. So I'll be back with you in a while. Good morning. Has it been the type of day today, or maybe it was yesterday for you, where you thought that maybe something was just a little too difficult for you and you kind of wished you hadn't gotten involved in it, or perhaps somebody was explaining a matter to you and you thought it was just going to take a little too much effort for you to fully understand what was being said. I think so many times when I try to understand something that maybe is just a little bit out of my line, let's take astronomy, for example. When we're talking about the sun, the moon, the stars, all of the galaxies and so on, and I appreciate those who know all of the information, who've done all of the studies. I find it a little difficult on occasion to, however, to maybe fully appreciate what they're saying. The figures, the statistics get a little beyond my comprehension. But I think of all things, a little poem that was written by a person who, well, he didn't know a great deal about those far-off places either. The fellow, yeah, you've come across his name. Yeah, all of his poetry is in the schools. Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman. Way back in 1865, he writes a poem that, well, I must say, I think it expresses something that perhaps others have encountered, where you get involved in a deep discussion of something that you're not completely up on, let's say, and you're just not quite sure. But look what Walt Whitman does with his poem. It's entitled, When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. This is his poem. It's not very long. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, it's just 8 lines. But notice the point. 1865 he wrote this. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and the diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer, where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon unaccountable I became, sick and tired, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. Why do I like that poem? Because I don't like astronomers? No, of course not. They're very dedicated, meaningful, important persons, and all of the statistics and the charts and the diagrams are very important. But do you see what the poem says? He couldn't grasp all of that. It just seemed to be so much, and he becomes weary of it. And so he leaves. He makes his option. He leaves and goes out into the moist night air, and from time to time he looks up at the stars. He looks up at the stars. He looks up in perfect silence at the stars. There's a sense of appreciation of all the stars out there. There's a sense of beauty, perhaps. There's a sense of, well, an awareness of, to some very small degree, perhaps, the meaning. But it's kind of a personal, shall we say, poetic response. In any event, it's not the one dedicated with the columns, the charts, the diagrams, the measuring, and all of the, shall we say, the technical references. I like the poem. I like the technical aspects, of course, of astronomy as well, but I must confess there have been times, and I have a feeling there were probably more than once over the years that I, at my classroom at Mount Union College, probably more than once that students in my class would look up at me as I'm writing on the blackboard something about dangling participles and gerunds and specificity and in developing sentences and so who knows. And they would just love to walk out and maybe maybe look up at the stars in perfect silence and maybe contemplate even writing, even dangling participles in perfect silence. That's why I like the poem. Well, it's time for you to go out now and ponder in perfect silence, and to help you with that, we'll conclude for today. I'll be back with you next week. Good morning, and I think that I know the titles of a number of books over the years, but a book written by Amsel Green many years ago about language and about the misinterpretation of some words. I think the title of the book is just terrific. Pullet Surprises. Pullet Surprises. P-U-L-L-E-T. Surprises. Well, why? Because Amsel Green, an excellent teacher, an excellent person with the use of language, developed this book, and in the acknowledgement says, I'm deeply indebted to my former high school students who unknowingly made this book possible. Why? Because the book is about misinterpretations of language, and the wrong word in the right place, and so on. And she says, the Pulitzer Prizes in this book are not offered in ridicule, no, but in a desire to share their delight with readers who will relish them, including even the students. Now, for example, who made the mistakes? What do we mean by this? Well, for example, take the word monetary. A teenager defined it for the moment. Monetarily disturbed, he quickly regained his composure. See that? Or how about divulge? That was assumed to mean a flood. Many were floundering in the great divulge. You can get an idea of what that means. And then we have, such things, goes on and on. Cliche could be a grip or a hold, such as, she didn't like to dance with him because of his tight cliche. See, that works from it pretty well. And how about polygamy? Might be a dread disease. How about epitaph? What about the little girl who wanted Elvis Presley's epitaph? What you mean, epitaph? Or is it autograph? Of course it is. She paid her intuition fee. How about that? Or the lieutenant was well trained in marital maneuvers. Ooh, I think martial is what is intended there. What? This one I think it's negatively delightful, I guess you might say. Annually, the club names its man of extinction. Extinction. Every car is equipped with a corroborator. How about that? A corroborator. Well, the book has student definitions and words, and you try to line up the definition with the word in whatever way it can be. It works out, I think, pretty well. And you have a sense of, for example, the word exhort. That's to get money by blackmail, see? Posterity, that's the back portion. Well, that works out pretty well, I guess. And the book is just full of this type of misuse of our language, let's say. But the book, the aspect that makes it so distinctive is the guessing games, where you have the words in one column and then the student definitions in another, and you try to line them up. In other words, you, as the reader, have to find the, shall we say, the wrong definition for the right word. It works out, I think, just delightfully. Bequest, that's an asking, you see. Indigent, that means you're outraged. Yes, I suppose it might. Anonymous means that all agreed. That's a good one. What does expiate mean? Well, one student assumed that it meant spit forth. You expiate. It works out pretty well, too. Panacea is an organ in the pit of the stomach. Well, it goes on and on and on. There are over 600,000 words in our English language. And that's why we can have so many misuses of them. Of course it is. And it's why we can have a sense of appreciation of the right way to do it, as well as some laughs at the wrong way to do it. And when we can see it both without, putting anybody down, why then we can understand that we're all capable of making mistakes. Oh yes, all of us. After all, I'm the fellow who many, many years ago said, I thought for years that this was the right word. You just take it for granite. Granite. I didn't know it until somebody was kind enough to point out to me. This was when I was just a youngster, of course. But we might still have other words even today. Who knows? And you can while away the hours, you see, by coming back for a few more minutes of the While with Lyle next week. Good morning, and I think that for a few moments here it might be appropriate for us to consider that today, are you ready for this? Some tongue twisters. I know that's not the most important topic in the world to discuss, but just for a few moments, I like the title of a chapter in one of the language books that I have is called Knapsack Strap. Knapsack Strap. And the author says that it's a good way of getting around to perhaps our 50 worst tongue twisters. Try repeating one of them 10 times. Well, I'm not going to try that because I know what it'll sound like, but I'd like to suggest some of them to you. Yes. The rat ran by the river with a lump of raw liver. Who would ever come up with that? 3 free thugs set 3 thugs free. How about that? Aren't you glad you tuned in this morning? Well, let's just try a very, very simple one. Toy boat. 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 Or what if you knew, well, let's see. You know Sister Susie? Sister Susie says she shall shortly sew a sheet. Sister Susie says she shall shortly sew a sheet. I'm not going to repeat that again. I might get a bad word in there someplace. Toy boat, toy boat, toy boat. And then we have the big black-backed bumblebee. The big black-backed bumblebee. The big black-backed bumblebee. Well, let's just remember. How about a lemon liniment? Lemon liniment. Lemon liniment. Yes. I just like to tell you a little story about the 2 bootblacks. That'll conclude our brief time together here, if I can do it. 2 bootblacks, a white bootblack and a black bootblack, stood together doing nothing. The white bootblack proposed that he should black the boots of the black bootblack. The black bootblack was perfectly willing to have his boots blacked by the white bootblack, so the white bootblack began to black the boots of the black bootblack. But when the white boot-black had blacked one boot of the black boot-black, he declined to black the other boot of the black boot-black until the black boot-black had blacked both boots of the white boot-black. However, the black boot-black refused point-blank to black the boots of the white boot-black, and said he didn't care whether the white boot-black blacked the other boot-black or not. He considered that one boot blacked was enough for a black boot-black, and that the black boot-black with one boot blacked was better than a white boot-black with no boots blacked. I did it. I think I did it. Well, I don't know. I'll have to listen to this sometime to see whether I think I made it, huh? Well, in any event, words, yes, this can happen to all of us. Try unique New York sometime. Unique New York. And go back with that toy boat, will you? Toy boat, toy boat. Or the raft ran by the river with a lump of raw liver. Go ahead, try it. And my congratulations if you can say any of those brief phrases 10 times and still have the right words. I'm going to have to leave you now. I need to get my boots blacked, and I've got to go to a boot black someplace and get this taken care of. Hope to have a little while with you next week.